Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It's closure for all my family, my sisters and my brothers.
BC serial murderer Robert Pickton has died days after he was attacked in a maximum security prison. Plus,
we will not be intimidated. We're not going to hide who we are. We're not going to take down our symbols.
Local Jewish leaders say they are outraged after a fire was lit in the doorway of a Vancouver synagogue.
It is being investigated as a possible hate crime.
And
this is what best fits the constituents of Caribou-Chilcotin, or at least the ones that have made it very clear to me that they wanted this move to happen.
Dirksen defects. A BC United MLA joins the BC Conservatives months before the provincial election.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. One of Canada's most notorious serial murderers is dead. Corrections officials confirm Robert Pickton has died. The 74-year-old BC man was hospitalized and in critical condition after he was violently attacked in a maximum security prison earlier this month. Pickton was convicted of 6 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison in 2007 after he was charged with murdering 26 women here in BC. Lindsay Duncombe has more from victims' families.
This is what's left of Robert Pickton's notorious pig farm. Remnants of the pain he caused, tributes to the women he killed. The serial killer was attacked by another inmate in prison earlier this month. The Vancouver Sun reports Pickton was stabbed in the head with a broken broom handle. For some victims' families, there is now closure, even joy.
A relief and just happy. To be honest, I jumped up and down.
Tammy Lynn Pappin's sister Georgina's DNA was found on Pickton's pig farm, along with the remains or DNA of 32 other women.
It was only her left hand, the bones of her left hand.
In 2007, Pickton was convicted of 6 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Official justice likely for only some of his victims. He had bragged to an undercover police officer he had killed 49 women.
Those families are reliving that now, and they're the ones who should be remembered, not the serial killer who committed those crimes.
Justice took too long. The conviction came a full decade after reports sex workers, many Indigenous, were disappearing from Vancouver's downtown east side. Investigations were botched. A commission later blamed systemic bias and fragmented policing.
Obviously, his legacy is one of horrible notoriety and the innocent suffering, the devastation that he caused so many innocent people.
Pickton's brutality and the failure to stop it sooner forced Canadians to reflect on how our institutions treat the vulnerable, especially Indigenous women, a reckoning still unfolding.
Now, if any vulnerable person goes missing, the police have an obligation, a legal obligation, to do an investigation and to report back to the families.
Police and prison officials are investigating the attack on Pickton, a brutal end for a man with a brutal legacy. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Leaders of Vancouver's Jewish community say they are outraged after a fire was set in the doorway of a synagogue on Thursday night. Police say they believe the blaze at the congregation Sharet Zedek on Oak Street is arson. And as Michelle Gassoub reports, it's left Jewish people here warning of a rise in anti-Semitic acts.
Something needs to call the police.
Outside the Sharet Zedek synagogue at Oak and 18th on Thursday night, congregants rushed to put out a fire that left the door blackened and charred. The result of what Vancouver police are calling an act of arson and a possible hate crime that has launched a criminal investigation. Police say some form of accelerant was used to start the fire here at a time when congregants were exiting the synagogue. Someone driving by alerted them that there was a fire that has left them shaken.
It seems very brazen for someone to attempt this, and it obviously makes us feel very vulnerable because this is a defenseless building, but people need to recognize these things happen to Jews, they have happened to Jews, and they have happened to Jews with disastrous consequences. And so you have to draw a line in the sand, and you have to draw it quickly and sharply.
Vancouver Police confirmed the Major Crimes Unit is now investigating. It's also coordinating directly with faith leaders as they attempt to identify who is responsible.
We are doing everything in our power to solve this crime while providing reassurance, comfort, and safety to the community. We will continue to have a higher police presence in strategic locations throughout the coming days as this investigation unfolds.
We also saw political reaction throughout the day. Justin Trudeau issued a post on the platform X calling it a disgusting act of anti-Semitism, saying we cannot let this hate or these acts of violence stand. Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim called the incident heinous. Premier David Eby described it as reprehensible. There has been a rise in anti-Semitic incidents right across Canada as tensions from nearly 8 months of war between Israel and Hamas have escalated. Fears that a conflict happening right across the world are impacting the lives of those who live and worship here. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
A man has now entered a guilty plea in the 2021 killing of his wife, Naomi Onatera. 49-year-old Obnis Regis was charged with manslaughter and indignity to human remains in 2021. This happened after Onatera's family reported her missing from her home in Langley. The case was then turned over to the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team once foul play was suspected. IHID says Regis has now pleaded guilty to both charges and is set to be sentenced next month. Meanwhile, another man has now been charged with second-degree murder in the death of his ex-wife here in BC. Vitaly Stefansky was arrested in April after the body of his ex-partner Tatiana Stefansky was found in a remote location. She had previously been reported as having been abducted from Lumby. Vitaly Stefansky is now in jail. Vancouver and transit police say a man has been arrested and charged after allegedly sexually assaulting a teenager in Mount Pleasant. Police began their probe 2 weeks ago after a 15-year-old girl was reportedly groped on a bus. The VPD says 25-year-old Brendan Jonathan Yates was arrested earlier this week and is now charged with 1 count of sex assault and 1 count of sexual interference. He's been released with several conditions. More than 100 protesters blocked train tracks in East Vancouver today, demanding that Canada impose full sanctions on Israel amid its ongoing war with Hamas. And police say they made more than a dozen arrests.
We took the rails to stop business as usual, to demand that Canada implement a two-way arms embargo in Israel, to demand that Canada sanction Israel fully, because even the highest courts have told Israel to stop, and they continue with absolute impunity.
Protesters gathered on Renfrew Street along the tracks there, where they lay down children's clothes to memorialize all those who've been killed in the war. Their demands come just days after the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to immediately end its military operation in Rafah. Police say protesters refused several requests to move, and some reportedly became hostile. The VPD says it then arrested 14 people for mischief and obstruction. BC's lowest paid workers will get a raise on Saturday. The minimum wage is going to go up to $17.40 an hour, the highest of any minimum in any province. Liam Britton has more on the fight for a living wage and for business owners worried about costs.
Sarah Borden-Jorgensen works for minimum wage at a restaurant in Yaletown. Her tips go a long way to help her and her partner get by, but they're hard to count on.
It makes it very difficult when you're trying to save for the future, especially if you have to take some time off work, you don't get paid time off.
Sarah is one of hundreds of thousands of workers in BC who will get a raise June 1st. The minimum wage will rise from $16.75 an hour to $17.40, 65 cents more.
Even though it's going to be a bit higher, the wage, I don't see it allowing a lot of people to make ends meet.
Only Nunavut and the Yukon pay more per hour in Canada.
And that's really good news for the workers who depend on it.
But Anastasia French says with affordability in mind, BC's minimum wage is far from a living wage.
1 in 3 workers in BC are not earning enough money to be able to pay for basic essentials like food and rent.
The living wage, as calculated by Living Wage for Families BC and the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, is what 2 working parents each would need to bring in per hour to buy basics like food, clothing, housing, and transport for a family of 4 in their community. Dawson Creek has BC's lowest living wage at $20.64 an hour. The highest is in Clayoquot Sound, $26.51. For major urban centres, Metro Vancouver is pegged at $25.68, the Fraser Valley at $20.66, Greater Victoria is at $25.40, Kelowna at $24.60, and Prince George at $22.09. Now, Living Wage for Families and the CCPA have released a report that finds 740,000 workers in BC, 32% of the workforce, don't make their community's living wage. Workers like 58-year-old Grim Culhane. He is a person with disabilities who cleans Vancouver's streets.
It affects your mental health, just knowing that you can afford to live. Having to scrape from paycheck to paycheck is very difficult.
French wants the province to take more action on affordability and set the minimum wage to $20 an hour. But the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses claims that would make tens of thousands of BC businesses unprofitable. Apparel store owner Jeff Martin pays more than minimum, but agrees wage increases step on bottom lines.
The margins keep getting lower and lower and lower, so this is just another thing that takes a little bite out of your already thin profit margin.
But he also agrees his staff need to deal with the high cost of living.
They're loyal, so I want to be loyal to them. Quite often it just means I pay myself a little less.
The province's Labour Ministry says the government has cut costs for childcare, electricity, and car insurance, capped rental increases, and is addressing food insecurity. It's also committing to more minimum wage hikes tied to inflation in future years. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
With rising costs, many Canadians are paying closer attention to their grocery bills. Sometimes prices vary on the same products depending on the province you live in. Benit Breach looked into some items shoppers could be paying more for and why.
When it comes to buying your groceries, it's no secret Canadians are really paying up. Now, a lot of us buy the same groceries, but depending on where you live, those same products might cost you more. Angel Lavoie recently moved from Toronto to Vancouver.
$90 to $100 on groceries, maybe a week, depending on, if I'm trying to eat healthier. Whereas I could get away with like $60, $70 on pretty much the same items in Toronto.
We wanted to see just how big those differences might be and why. So we picked 3 well-known national grocery stores:
Walmart, Superstore, and No Frills, and compared the same products between Ontario and BC. For example, at Superstore, this chicken, the exact same item, costs $3 more in BC. Bell peppers, $2.59 more, and naan, a flyer item, $2 more. At No Frills, this chicken costs $1 more in BC, Granny Smith apples cost $2 more, and Silk beverages just 10 cents more. We even took a shopping trip to Walmart to compare the costs. I shopped here in Vancouver, and my colleague...
Hi, I'm Ashley, and I'm here in Toronto at the Walmart.
So the grand total for everything, $76.80.
We bought the same 16 items, and I ended up paying about $7 more in BC.
Now, of course, not every product is pricier in BC. This milk was cheaper here, and many items also cost the same, like the cereal and these brownies. But why do some products cost more? Well, here are some factors.
Walmart says different market conditions impact prices, including costs to bring products to Canada. Loblaws echoes transportation, and overall costs to run the store are other factors.
Let's unpack it a bit more, starting with distribution costs.
You can think about the West as being just a smaller number of people spread across a larger amount of space than Ontario. Then it's going to be more costly to be getting things into those stores.
For example, Ontario has more Walmarts per capita than BC. Experts say the more stores there are, the lower distribution costs companies have to pay, and the more you could save. Plus, costs to clean, package, and store products can also be higher in different places.
And competition is another big factor.
Experts say in bigger markets, stores really have to compete to bring in customers, so you could see lower prices or flash sales more often. Prices also depend on how much stores pay for products themselves.
I know that there are some regional brands in British Columbia who might not buy as cheap, so prices may be a bit higher. That might allow some of the discount stores to price a little higher.
And another reason could be how people respond to products.
Grocery stores fundamentally rent shelf space. If the item sells a little less frequently, then it has to generate a little bit more margin to justify the space on the shelf that it occupies.
So yeah, there can be many reasons for different costs on the same items. Inflation has been cooling for some products, like meat and fruit. But just in the last 3 years, grocery prices have increased 21.4%, according to Statistics Canada. Loblaws and Walmart say they're trying to keep costs down, something experts say is increasingly important as consumers like Angel are having to pay closer attention to their grocery bills.
I don't eat as healthy because the unhealthy stuff tends to be a little bit cheaper.
Benit Brach reporting. There is a notable shift in BC politics just months before a provincial election. The caucus chair for BC United is defecting to the BC Conservatives.
I've had a number of people that have reached out to me, and when I say a number, I mean dozens and dozens and dozens, right? I mean, that have been very clear that they feel that this party, the Conservative Party of BC, is the only alternate choice to the NDP. And
Lorne Dirksen's move increases the Conservative Party's numbers in the legislature to 3. They say they plan to field up to 93 candidates in the election this fall. United and the Conservatives say they discussed some kind of merger or non-competition deal, but talks broke down. Environment Canada is forecasting another warm and dry summer, and with that, the province is expanding its free air conditioner program with $20 million more in funding. The ACs are geared towards seniors, low-income earners, and vulnerable people who could be at risk during heat events.
The program is targeted really at those who are struggling the most with costs, and that's why the income thresholds are set up. But they are based on household size as well. So with bigger families, a family of 4, for example, the income threshold would be $73,800. So making it a bit more accessible for families like that.
Keep in mind, anyone can qualify for a $50 rebate on eligible portable air conditioning units. More than 600 people died in BC during the brutal 2021 heat dome. All defendants are denying fault in a lawsuit alleging a negligent and unsanctioned kickboxing fight in BC left a novice fighter in a vegetative state. Injured man Zhen Huanlei's mother is suing everyone connected to last year's West Coast Martial Arts Championship in Burnaby. The 5 organizers are denying negligence, claiming the tournament was kick light, not kickboxing, meaning a sanction was not required. The other defendants named in the suit are one of Leigh's opponents, the World Kickboxing and Karate Union Canada, as well as Simon Fraser University. No claims from any party have been proven in court. Metro Vancouver directors have now approved a cost-sharing plan for a new, expensive wastewater plant in North Vancouver. That project has faced several problems, including a massive rise in its cost, from an original $700 million to now close to $4 billion. Chad Pawson heard from some of the decision-makers.
Ballooning costs for a North Shore wastewater treatment plant are making for hard decisions within the regional government. A project that was already to be operational is delayed by years over problems with its builders and a skyrocketing price tag.
Will be dealt with separately and don't need to be pulled.
We respect all of you immensely and understand you too have your challenges. This one is a big one though, and we can't move forward without all of you next to us. We are
Sorry about that. Some tech issues. We'll try to get that story for you a little later in the show. Darius Madavi now with our first look at the weather as we gear up for a weekend. What do we get?
Yeah, it just means you get me earlier. So it's a win-win. We'll see that in a moment. But for now, we are starting to see that rain come down to southwestern BC. It's going to continue moving through, but this is really just the first taste of it. Sunday's going to be a lot more active, which we'll see here. If you take a look across southwestern BC, we're starting to see that rain come down. Again, it is heading to the North Island as well, just don't have radar coverage there. Going to keep coming down, affect Vancouver at times in the morning, but not going to last too long here. It's just going to pass through, and then we'll see some scattered showers throughout the afternoon. So there'll be a wet period probably in the overnight hours, but it could shift into parts of the morning. And then we're going to continue to see that system roll off. So just some showers throughout the day on Saturday. And then excitement comes on Sunday. Lots of heavy rain, lots of more consistent rainfall. It's going to make its way across the region, moving across BC, and also hitting parts of the interior as well. So a very wet day for the vast majority of the province as we get into Sunday. And Vancouver, not going to escape it anytime soon. Lots and lots of rain here as well. The highest amounts probably on the North Shore, or definitely going to be on the North Shore. And then the west coast of Vancouver Island also going to be hit very hard. East coast of the island will mostly escape it, but they will get a decent amount of rainfall. And this is just going to be lots of rain, breaks in the rain on Saturday. But as soon as we get into Sunday, it's just going to be very, very heavy rainfall. So.
And we need it.
Yes, Dan, we need it.
Thank you, Darius. Love is in the air. Or not. After the break, we're going to speak with a private investigator who explains how victims can protect their wallets and their hearts from romance scams. Stick around. Romance scams are one of the most common scams out there. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre says they were responsible for some of the highest financial losses in 2023, costing 945 victims more than $50 million. And those numbers only reflect the victims who reported to authorities. Not only are these frauds hard on the wallet, they can also hurt the heart. To talk about the impact now, we're joined by Suzanne Edmondson. She's a private investigator with Axiom Investigations, in fact, the founder of that. You've been doing this for 20 years. How have the romance scams changed over that time?
Exponentially. Yeah. They have changed in volume. They've changed in the way that they're done. They've changed in technology, and the big one right now is AI. So even if people believe that they're, putting a level of protection by demanding that they speak by video, it's actually not the case because it's not a person.
So they can even fake being themselves on video now.
Right.
Wow. And how many cases would you say that you've dealt with so far like that?
Oh, countless,
really?
Countless. And you're right about the reporting, because most of them don't end up getting reported, and especially with men. Men are less likely to report as victims of romance scams. There's two types, actually. The one that is strictly online and the parties never meet, although the victim does still believe that they're in a relationship, so the damage there is more than monetary. And then there's the long game, the in-person. That one has changed a lot since the pandemic, and the price of rent has gone through the roof. So we've got now people on dating apps who are looking to literally just move in with someone for free.
and it's beyond couch surfing, obviously.
Right. So they want it to go very quickly to move in, and then and then they start collecting evidence from there.
Got it.
And I'm not a lawyer. I stay in my lane, but never a good idea to let somebody cohabitate with you if you're the one with the assets without a cohabitation agreement.
Something written down.
Right, because what they're going to do is they are going to move in. They may or may not pay something towards the first rent. That's the last money you're going to see, just to be clear.
Yeah.
But then they will do things like whatever it takes to make it look like you guys are in a common law relationship, because that's the whole thing, because common law now includes property.
That's right.
So
I have to ask, how can people, you've clearly been dealing with victims, how do people prevent themselves from getting into these situations in the first place? It's hard enough being a victim, but how can you avoid this?
I know this is going to sound a little bit harsh, but especially when it is the online only one, don't send people you don't know money. Don't do that.
Seems basic.
Even in the in-person ones, unless consenting adults have met somewhere where they both understand, they're on the same page, they both know what's up, no victim, no judgment. But it's when one person believes that they're in a relationship, in love. And even in the in-person ones, people shouldn't be asking you for money when you start dating someone, and definitely if you've never met them. So that right there, that's the big grant. Like, don't do it.
Suzanne Edmondson, we're out of time, but we so appreciate your time and your expertise. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump is fighting back, one day after the guilty verdicts came down in his criminal trial. That story is next. In the U.S., former president and now convicted felon Donald Trump is fighting back. The day after he was found guilty of 34 criminal counts, he gave a long speech denying wrongdoing, attacking the system, and rallying supporters. Chris Reyes has more from the scene at Trump Tower and the response.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Fresh off his conviction and back on his own turf, Donald Trump launched into his own version of what happened.
If they can do this to me, they can do this to anyone. These are bad people.
The rambling speech lasted more than half an hour, jumping around from grievances against a criminal trial to a smattering of election issues. But the core message was clear. His political rival was to blame.
Just so you understand, this is all done by Biden and his people.
Trump has never substantiated those attacks, and the criminal trial in New York was brought by the Manhattan District Attorney, an office independent of the White House. They will appeal. There are some issues that are worthy of consideration on appeal, but in the trial, as it was set out pre-trial with all the rules, they were convicted, and that's what they have to respect. Also standing up for the rule of law, President Biden, who has never commented on the case until now.
That's how the American system of justice works. And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict.
Free Trump! Free Trump! Outside Trump Tower, a snapshot of the court of public opinion, where conclusions are much more varied than the now historic unanimous guilty verdict. Trump, who's now casting himself as a victim and a martyr, clearly more concerned about winning sympathy and votes.
I'm honored to be involved in it because somebody has to do it, and I might as well keep going and be the one. But I'm very honored to be involved because we're fighting for our Constitution. While Trump focuses on his campaign, his legal team have their marching orders, appeal all 34 convictions.
President Trump has put faith in me and my team, and there's a lot of great people that I work with.
A change now in policy on how Ukraine uses its weapons. It can now use American munitions to strike targets inside Russia, specifically to defend the contested Kharkiv region. Briar Stewart has more.
The agony of a husband calling out for his wife and their daughter. They all lived on what was the third floor of this building in Kharkiv that was struck overnight by 2 missiles. He hasn't been able to reach his family since. His daughter and wife are in there, said this man. I'm in shock. This is the latest deadly attack on the Kharkiv region, which is why Ukraine says it needs to be able to use Western-supplied weapons to target military sites inside Russia before it launches more strikes. Now the U.S. is shifting its policy.
That went right to the president, and as you've heard, he's approved the use of our weapons for that purpose.
Germany granted similar approval, and like the U.S., its policy is limited. Ukraine is allowed to use Western-supplied weapons to try and stop attacks on Kharkiv, but it can't use them to launch long-range strikes deeper into Russia. At least not for now, says Ukraine's president.
I think that using any weapon, Western kind of weapon, on the territory of Russia, it's the question of time.
When asked about the use of Western weapons, the Kremlin said that NATO members have been entering a new round of escalation and tensions, and they're doing it deliberately. This military expert says NATO members remain concerned about Western weapons accidentally causing civilian casualties in Russia, which is why some will continue to tread cautiously.
Giving Ukraine a free hand in Russia carries with it risks. But of course, Russia, from the outset of the war, has had a free hand in what it's done in Ukraine.
And what it continues to do. At least 5 were killed in the strikes overnight. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
A new survey on mental health and stressful events is offering new insight into how Canadians are doing. And it's not looking good. 2 out of 3 adults polled say they've experienced some sort of trauma. Christine Burek looks at the impact that can have and what you can do about it.
We all experience stress, but some moments stay with people.
Lots and lots of rumination,
where, you just can't shut the brain off. You're thinking about something over and over and over.
A new Stats Canada survey found nearly 2/3 of adults say they've directly or indirectly been exposed to a traumatic event, mainly unwanted sexual experiences and natural disasters. A life-threatening illness, physical assaults rank high, but vehicle crashes top the list.
And the thing that really stuck with me with that one was her eyes. Her eyes were open, and I'm looking into her eyes as I'm trying to ventilate her.
Rob Lethan was a firefighter for 30 years. He says the accumulation of multiple traumatic events eventually led him to get help, but not before he tried to take his own life.
We now know that emotional trauma, psychological trauma, is actually toxic to the hardware, to the brain.
Doctors say, like Lethan, about 6 to 10% of adults experience symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, which leads to higher rates of unemployment, heavy drinking, and cannabis use. This psychiatrist says the earlier someone recognizes trauma, the better.
Get help, talk to somebody, get documented, find out what the resources are.
Sometimes I can't even close the door because they are feeling so panicked and so anxious.
This occupational therapist works with people traumatized after car crashes.
We have to identify the negative thoughts or the faulty way of thinking. We have to challenge those thoughts with proof and evidence, and then we have to replace those thoughts with more objective and realistic ways of thinking.
Yeah, I still do get triggered from things, but I've got the toolbox, the mental toolbox now of able to deal with it.
For Lethan, mental health supports made the difference between life and death. Christine Burak, CBC News, Toronto.
You might be familiar with this motel on mighty Kingsway. Now it's been recognized for sustainability. We'll show you why after this. We have some developing news to share with you. Ridge Meadows RCMP say officers are responding to shots fired near Lougheed Highway and 222nd Street in Maple Ridge right now. No word yet if anyone has been hurt or what led to that gunfire. We are making calls. Mounties are asking the public to avoid that area and plan other ways to get around. We'll bring you any updates we get later in the show and on our late local news at 11 o'clock with Tanya Fletcher. Darius Madavi is back for our province-wide forecast as we head into a weekend. Is the whole province going to get rain?
Not the parts you're hoping, Dan.
Okay.
Yes, up in the northeast and actually across the north, this is where we're going to see the least amount of rain, if any. There's a chance of thunderstorms and some showers up in Fort Nelson today into tomorrow, but beyond that, not much at all expected. Even that, not going to drop much rain. The north coast and the central coast getting plenty of rain, but yeah, up here, not so much. Pretty much looking pretty dry. Down here, though, lots of rain, which means fire danger going to stay low. But I thought we should highlight the fact that even though it's going to feel like a very wet weekend for many of us, it's not really going where we might hope it will. If we take a look at the temperatures across the province, today, pretty seasonal in many places, a few places still a little bit below, which has really been the trend for the last week. In the valley, that's going to be where we see our big drop tomorrow. Other than that, pretty consistent in terms of temperatures. Then as we get into Sunday, southern interior sees a pretty significant drop of 5 degrees or so. And then another significant drop pretty much across the interior as we head into Monday. Temperatures are expected to start to recover as we get into mid next week. Wednesday and Thursday looking dry and looking a little bit sunnier and a little bit warmer. So there is an end in sight to the cooler temperatures and the rain, but we got to get through the rain that is coming first. So here you can see, as soon as we switch to that wider model, so the more fine-tuned one, not much going up into the northeast, just a few scattered showers. If we switch into the wider one, you'll see there is a possibility of some making its way up into the northeast as we get later into the weekend and into early next week, but I wouldn't count on seeing too much. For the most part, that forecast is going to remain sunny, except for maybe in some overnight periods where we may see a little bit of precipitation. For the rest of the province, though, very wet in the days ahead. Parts of the Okanagan and the Thompson likely to see some thunderstorms tomorrow, or not likely, have a chance to see some thunderstorms tomorrow. If you're in the South Okanagan, though, or the Boundary region, probably just a few showers. If we take a look at conditions across the province tomorrow, you'll notice plenty of rain, but it'll look even more rainy than this as we get into Sunday. And again, this should be mostly sunshine with just a little bit of showers as a possibility. If we zoom in to Metro Vancouver, we can take a look at our 5-day forecast where you'll see very rainy period, but we can highlight here. So yeah, Saturday, some lighter stuff, especially in the morning, and then afternoon drying out a little bit, but still showers at times, especially if you're on the North Shore. Sunday, very wet, very windy, especially if you're on the North Shore. Monday, just a bit of showers. Tuesday, some periods of rain, but really more consistent. And then Wednesday, dry and sunny. And how many different ways can I say it's going to rain, Dan?
Really, really amazing. And of course, it's Friday, so that means... Fun Fact Friday. And Darius is here to tell us what would happen if, I don't know, the sun disappeared right now.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very fun. It wouldn't be very fun, but it is fun to think about what would happen.
Is it?
As a little thought experiment, just poof, the sun is gone, what would happen? You'd think we would know immediately, but no, we would have no idea for the longest time, because even as the Earth does orbit the sun, its light takes about 8 minutes to reach us. Light, fastest thing in the universe, still takes time to travel, about 8 minutes for it to get from the sun to us. So if the sun just, say, disappeared right now, it would still take about 8 minutes for us to notice the complete lack of light in the Earth, completely in darkness. But you might think, but Darius, we also orbit the sun, right? So if the sun disappears, we have nothing to orbit anymore. The Earth will fly off into space. But no, because gravity also exerts its force at the speed of light. Gravity is not instantaneous. So we would still be orbiting empty space for 8 minutes before we flew off into space. And because everything in the universe exerts gravity on everything else, if you look up into the night sky, those stars died millions or billions of years ago. There could be dead stars pulling on you, dead galaxies exerting their gravity on you as we speak.
We got enough to worry about without dead galaxies. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, if you've driven along Kingsway here on Earth, perhaps the sun being out, you may have noticed a set of 18 one-story buildings from the 1940s. The 2400 Motel is owned by the city, and it was recently recognized for sustainability. Caroline Chan checked it out.
I'm here at the 2400 Motel on Kingsway in Vancouver, and we're here because they won a sustainability award from the BC Hotel Association. We're going to speak to the GM, Christian, about the steps they've taken to be sustainable and the steps that you can adopt as well. Caroline.
Hi Caroline, I'm Christian. I'm the general manager of the 2400 Motel here.
Tell us a little bit about the property here because it's so historic.
Absolutely, it's a really unique space. It's been here for 78 years. It's the last old school motel in Vancouver, in Metro Van. It's pretty exciting that way. It's a big space, drive up to your door kind of thing from back in the day. It's 3.5 acres and there's 18 buildings with our various units on them. And we front right on a Kingsway, so right here on the side of busy Kingsway. Quiet right this second, which is nice, but a pretty vibrant place to be.
What kind of approach have you taken when it comes to sustainability? Because you've won the award from the BC Hotel Association.
Yeah, that was really cool. That was very exciting. Thank you for mentioning
Congratulations.
it. Thank you. We're a beacon in the city. We're up literally on the hill, but we also have been a place people look up to for a long time. And so just seeing us do the right thing, and even at our age, trying anything at least once is really been positive. Right? There's so many things we could do. Again, at 78 years old, there's lots that back then wasn't a priority that nowadays is. There's things that they had to power back then that either we don't power now or we power way more of now. Technology obviously is way more of a draw than it used to be, so that's been a tricky challenge. And then just logistics, right? I mentioned there's 3.5 acres and all these buildings. Getting power to them, getting internet to them, getting all those modern day features and amenities, the upgrade and active has been tricky.
Can we check out some of the things that you've been doing?
Yeah, let's go explore a little bit. So we're gonna pop into this one, which is one of our one-bedroom suites. We're really unique that way. We have some places that are almost like apartments. It's kind of one of those pieces that sets us apart. What?
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's pretty cool. We've been able to do some renovations in here, obviously, as you can kind of see looking around. We have new eco flooring in, and so that was a really big get for us, because before that, it was a motel from way back when. It was definitely carpet. And we've been able to repurpose some furnishings. So a lot of our stuff we get from local hotels that have to maybe renovate. A lot of them have contracts where they have to renovate X years and their stuff is still great. So instead of going to a landfill or whatever, we try and get it off them. So that works really well. So in this particular unit, we have a fair bit of that going on as well. Most of the units, like I said, there's 18 buildings. Most of them are wood frame, cedar shake, singles for the ceiling kind of, or for the roof kind of thing. It's old school, definitely.
So for people who are living in older homes, like the things that you've been doing for sustainability could work for them as well, right?
I'm probably a lot like them, right? Like it's the foundation's the foundation, and then wood on top of it. So dealing with, my electrical panels are probably the same age as well. So a lot of those same struggles. But like I say, doing things like LED lighting works anywhere. Moving over into the faucet, same idea, right? You could have ancient piping, and we do, but it's aerated now, right? So we have those faucet heads on top that kind of help reduce the water flow, and you don't waste as much, but the pressure is actually better. So it's a great win that way. Not terribly expensive either. So an easy homeowner kind of fix that we applied here.
But this is still a hotel. So what are some of the things that you've been doing that are very specific to the hotel industry?
Can I show you?
Sure.
All right, so we're here. This is the bedroom. We're able to take one of our bedspreads and totally go kind of back to school on it. It's GRS certified, so it's made of recycled materials, and it's microfiber, so it feels really good, but it also dries fast. About 30% faster than your traditional linen, which means that I can use less energy if I'm going to use the dryers, which is awesome. Or I can hang it. We're old school. We have some of the dryer line and that kind of thing. So in the summer, the housekeeping team will do some air drying, and it's pretty cool. It takes a lot less time. It's viable.
We're coming into a busy travel season. What should people think about if they want to go to sustainable properties?
Everybody talks about it. It's a really big marketing thing right now. So everyone's putting the effort into it, which is great. It's great to see the exposure. But just actually making sure there's actually things happening, because most places who are doing it are pretty proud of doing it. They're forward on either social channels or on their website. Like it's there, you can see it. So just if it's important to you, look for it.
Okay, so we've talked about sustainability on the inside. What have you done for sustainability on the outside?
One of the things that we've done here is our spacing, right? I mentioned we did some of our reconstruction rental projects. One was paving, and when we did, we took the chance to put a couple of EV chargers in, rain barrels, rainwater collection for watering later on, especially like in the summer here, there's always drought restrictions. And so it's a great way for us to kind of recycle some water and reuse it because we have 18 roofs collecting. So it's pretty powerful that way for us. We have a lot of green, so landscaping is a big piece of what we do as well. Trying to be intentional with, the bringing in, the native plants and shrubs and those kinds of pieces and wildflowers around. And, you'll have seen some of those in our walk.
So what do you envision for the future then?
It's do something, right? Like, whether it's, me in 18 of these units or someone at home on their own, like, look at it, right? Like, a lot of our windows are still single pane glass. Double painting is definitely a viable thing to look at, right? Like, there's so many things you can tackle it, and, not just a big commercial property, right? The homeowner doing their one bedroom house can do the same thing, so.
Well, I'm excited to see what the future holds, so thank you so much for this tour.
Thanks for coming by, appreciate it.
If you enjoy long walks, you might be keen on a popular trail on Prince Edward Island. We'll tell you about the 700-kilometer loop after this.
As the weather continues to warm up, there's more incentive to get outside. And on Prince Edward Island, The Island Walk has been attracting long-distance walkers for 5 years.
It is a 700-kilometer loop around the island, growing in popularity with more trail access and more places to stay. Laura Meter caught up with one intrepid walker.
Betty Hope Gittins is out here doing about 25 kilometers a day, and you would never guess it. She's 85 years old.
Do you know, we conjure up an image that to be old, you must be decrepit. You don't have to be. Walking, our bodies are made to walk. It is beautiful here.
She's from Ottawa and is doing the 700-kilometer island walk to raise money to help with homelessness and food insecurity there. She's one of about 500 people expected to do the walk this year. The walk goes throughout the province, including roads and trails.
The walk on the trail is fantastic. There are benches, there are places for old people like me to rest. The highway walks are not my favorites because there are no resting spots.
She's hoping some benches can be put up on the road sections, and volunteers say they are working on that, and some might even be up before she's done. The route has been changed slightly this year, too, to give walkers more trail time.
We're trying to maximize the path walking or the trail walking. We're increasing the amount of the Confederation Trail that we actually use as well.
At first, there was a shortage of accommodations, but volunteers have been able to convince more places to open up near the Island Walk route.
What people really want is to have an accommodation that's right on the route, so they don't have to get off the route to get to their where they're sleeping that night.
This walker is staying in a dome that's part of a resort right beside the Island Walk. It's been good for business, especially because a lot of walking happens in the off-season.
Yeah, because we have like helping walkers like for accommodations and stuff like that. And yeah, we have quite a few guests that was booked this year.
The founder of the walk says it's attracting people from all over the world, and so far May has been busy with dozens of walkers, and many more are expected in the months to come. Laura Meter, CBC News, Rustico.
Cool. Would you do that?
Are you going to approve my time off to go do it?
Naturally.
It would take me a while. I think I'll do 1 kilometer a day.
Betty does 25.
I know, but then I don't have to go to work. I'm kidding. I love to be here.
Look at this smart fat boy Slim.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
Tanya Fletcher will have your next local news at 11 o'clock right after the National with the latest on the shots fired in Maple Ridge, so please join her then. And we leave you with a look at the White Rock Night Market. Good night.